Hey guys, it's John. Before we get started, I want to make this clear. This video will be discussing the sexual misconduct allegations that have been left unchecked since the summer of 2020. I'm not going to discuss the specific details of these allegations because frankly they make my stomach churn. I will be discussing them in general, as well as the rest of Ubisoft's scummy business practices over the past decade and their inaction and opacity in the last year. That does include some discussion of those reports of sexual abuse, so if that sort of thing bothers you or is a trigger for you, then this is your chance to click away. So last summer, Ubisoft was exposed by a ton of its employees regarding chronic sexual abuse going on in the company. People were coming out and opening up about the rampant sexist, oppressive attitude that their work environment had, which had until this point been being covered up by members of their HR, team leaders, and the like. A movement was started by several members of the community, namely the Four Pillars, as well as the newly formed AC Sisterhood, and for a few days these allegations spread into the mainstream. People were talking about it and Ubisoft noticed. In response, we got what basically amounted to a PR stunt. A few of the people engaging in this sexual misconduct were let go from the company in some way or another, such as Ashraf Ismail, Sergei Haskat, and Escablades. However, the majority of Ubisoft's actions were just taken to remove those in the most public light from the company. And that saved face, but it didn't really reach the root of the issue. A study conducted in the past year reported by The Verge detailed that even after the apparent changes were made within Ubisoft, changes that were only ever vaguely detailed, I might add, 1 in 4 Ubisoft employees out of almost 14,000 in total reported that they didn't feel fully respected or safe in the work environment. That was in October of last year, and you might be inclined to believe that things have changed since then after the issue was brought to light. Unfortunately, it seems not really that much has changed. At the very least, we don't know the specifics. That which I believe we, as the potential consumers of their product, are owed. A much more recent investigation reported that it seems very little has actually changed within Ubisoft despite that initial push. Ubisoft's HR director, Cecile Cornet, has only recently left the company and was replaced with Annika Grant as Chief People Officer from Uber. Ubisoft also recently appointed Rashi Sika as VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion. However, an elected rep from Ubisoft's Social and Economic Committee said they don't expect anything to come out of these appointments, as the HR staff that covered the harassment issues are still in positions of power. Meanwhile, plenty of other men at the center of the harassment allegations also remain in power, such as Florent Castelnerac, I am sure I'm pronouncing that very poorly, head of Ubisoft-owned Nadeo, and he was accused of harassment by a dozen employees. However, for whatever reason, he was protected by management. Another example is Hughes Ricoeur, who stepped down in November, but he still retains a different position at the company. A lot of these dangerous sexual predators within the company were just shifted around or only recently got kicked out, which is really disturbing to think about. And furthermore, things have only gotten worse in the company's Canada studios. In fact, since the appointment of Yves Guillemot's cousin, Christophe Derain, which again I'm probably butchering that, yet more cases of workplace harassment have been reported by employees, but a lot of those have been since brushed over and dismissed. Ubisoft has also inputted a sort of anonymous report system through an external source. However, importing something like that doesn't really do all that much in my opinion, as all you're really doing is taking the blame somewhere else, and that's really easy for these sorts of issues to get just brushed over under the rug like everything has been in the past year. And all of this so far has left me genuinely angry. There was a huge push last year to make something happen and start to improve Ubisoft's boy club culture that we've long since known about. If you need any more proof that the company as a whole is woefully sexist, just give a look at Sergei's blithering statement that women don't sell in video games, which resulted in a decisive lean away from following the female leads of the past 4 Assassin's Creed games since Syndicate. For example, Evie Fry was originally intended to have 50-50 gameplay time with her, in my opinion, distinctly less interesting brother Jacob, and a considerable amount of Aya's gameplay got scrapped from Origins, as well as the remarkably unnecessary option to change Eivor's gender in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the likes of which is a game that seems to present us with the premise that Ubisoft believes assassins in Assassin's Creed don't sell either, but that's beyond the point of this video. According to the main investigation, ideas to improve the situation have been suggested, such as making sure more women are hired at Ubisoft, but ideas like that didn't really seem to leave the conference room floor. Ubisoft has also provided a promise that they'll be updating their code of conduct But the last time I checked, don't sexually harass your coworkers was sort of a no-brainer for most people. Furthermore, if someone violated such a rule before, there's not really something that seems to be stopping them from doing it again. Their code of conduct be damned. But the final straw for me comes with the last line of the original article, stating, quote, "We perceive a desire from management to leave the crisis from summer 2020 behind, as it represents a risk for the group's durability. But training must be renewed regularly and offered to new staff. For now, this request has not been addressed," end quote. So you're telling me that not only is Ubisoft being incredibly vague and opaque as to what exactly they've been doing to change, and not only have reports of sexual abuse continued to be filed since last year, but Ubisoft just wants to sweep all this under the rug? Unfortunately, it's something that they're incredibly good at. Its coverage from the issue disappeared after just a few days last year, so Ubisoft used their PR moves to make everyone feel that things were okay when they really only stagnated. It's disturbing how easily they've made people forget about this, and it really needs to get back into the mainstream, which it has been over the past week. Because simply put, Ubisoft isn't the company it used to be. The days of innovation, being at the forefront of the gaming industry, the source of inspiration and creativity, all that is gone, and it has been for a really long time. In Laser's discussion of this issue, which is an excellent video that I'll link in the description, along with those of Long-Eared Fox and Fishy, he breaks down what Ubisoft has been doing to the gaming industry. He discusses the oversaturation, the bland game design, the free-to-play vibes that Ubisoft's AAA games are providing for a full price tag, and how normalized microtransactions have become, with people just being okay with the fact that Ubisoft is reselling gear and gear packs and reskins from both previous games and from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the most recent entry itself, all at full price. Once upon a time, changing the color of your gear cost you a bit of in-game currency. Now you're having to spend roughly $15 for Helix credits that you can then use in-game on a gear pack that's just a recolor of a previous one. They're doing this and people are buying into it, which means that they're not only making profit, but they're getting away with what is essentially swindle. Their games have become empty grind fests that you can't wait to be over, so you spend additional money to pay for time savers on a game that you should want to enjoy. But you don't, because the game design has been reduced to essentially rubbish by greedy corporate executives who solely want players to spend more money. To clarify, this isn't the fault of the game devs, who had to rush a semi-broken game filled with nothing collectibles out the door. This isn't the narrative team's fault, who had to chop up what might have been an engaging story into meandering quest arcs that have no satisfying conclusion. And this isn't Darby McDevitt's fault, who fought for every ounce of actual assassin content in this Assassin's Creed game. This is on the execs who just want to see numbers rise on a chart. And look, I get it. If you don't like the packs, don't get them. If you don't like the game, don't play it. If you don't like the company, don't support it. Yes, of course, to all of those things. But is it truly so hard to read between the lines and see what's going on here? It's bigger than the games. It's bigger than Assassin's Creed. And as much of a symptom of this problem as it might be, the fact of the matter is that Ubisoft doesn't care about its communities. It sure as hell doesn't care about its employees. The center of all of this is Yves Guillemot, who is either an incompetent CEO to let all of this go right on under his nose, or is willfully complicit and simply allows this behavior to continue, with the bare minimum being done on his end to ensure that things improve. And when you consider how financially successful Ubisoft has become in the last decade, I'm going to let you decide for yourself on which one you think that is. So if you take anything away from this video, take this. From this point, I will no longer be supporting Ubisoft. As long as Yves remains employed at Ubisoft and the company remains in its current state, I won't be purchasing their products, I won't be covering their games, and I won't be partaking in their events. I had plans and an outline written for a fairly large lore/review video discussing my thoughts and changes I would make to Eivor's narrative arc, but that video, along with any future Assassin's Creed content, will be put on hold until further notice. That further notice being when we see real change happening at Ubisoft. I want to see transparency. I want the community and the industry to know what Ubisoft is doing in specific detail. And I want them to follow through on full company sweeps to remove a strong majority of all the sexual predators and complacent parties within the company. It's doubtful that all of them are going to be dealt with, but I want to see as many gone as possible. Just yesterday we received a corporate summary of all the changes that have been made at the company, but once again, all it's doing is saving face and ultimately keeping the public in the dark. It's little more than damage control in my opinion, but I'll link it below so you can draw your own conclusions. Additionally, I want Yves Guillemot removed from his position as the Ubisoft CEO. Whether he's an incompetent businessman or a complicit one, it's obvious to me that he no longer belongs in a position of power at Ubisoft. I don't really care if it's a family company, because the fact of the matter is that regardless of his family or his legacy within the company, the negatives far outweigh any positive, that being profit, that might exist. I want him replaced by somebody who really cares about what's going on. Somebody who wants to incite real change in this company and make it better, not somebody who's only interested in the paycheck. Finally, I want to see the community as a whole come together and fight for this change that we want to see. I remember last summer when the Four Pillars and the Sisterhood got into a bit of a beef as to how best to handle the situation. All it did is end up in infighting. And the issue is that Ubisoft wants the fans to fight and argue, because then it takes the heat off of them and puts the community back to square one. That can't happen this time. Dynamite put it really well in the 9th episode of the Four Pillars podcast, and I'll paraphrase by saying that we don't have to be friends within the community. We don't even have to talk to people we might not like or disagree with. We have to focus our upset and anger and our energy on a common target, that being Ubisoft's executives, its HR, and the ones in management who covered for these abusive sexual predators in Ubisoft's workplace. In short, I want to see this company better itself from the inside out, and I'll happily never touch a Ubisoft licensed Assassin's Creed product again until that happens. I love Assassin's Creed, and once upon a time, I wanted to be one of those creative leads working on these games. I wanted to be the next Darby McDevitt, who has as of recently left Ubisoft to bigger and greater things, and I wish him all the best. But as Ubisoft is now, I understand why Darby would leave. And until we see this company undergo huge change, I never want to be a part of the company to begin with. As a community, beyond Assassin's Creed, beyond Ubisoft, and into the mainstream of the gaming industry, we need to hold Ubisoft accountable. Thanks for watching.